Thank you, Leon, Anne, and everyone. It's wonderful to be back this time during the Rohatsu session, as it's called. This is the most intensive full week from the morning of December 1st to the early morning of the 8th, where in uh, a Rinzai monastery, you do not lie down for the entire week, even when you have short times to sleep. Even the sleeping you do in the Zazen posture. It commemorates Gautama Buddha's awakening under the Bodhi tree. It is, again, the most intense week. In a sense, the whole year of practice leads up to this week. And this weekend retreat for us a bit lighter, but it happens to fall during that time. It can sound rather gruesome, rather extreme, and it is, not lying down for a whole week, but to put it more in our own practice as lay people, the point is for the practice to be constant. Dogen Zenji, considered the father of Soto Zen in Japan, himself had his awakening sitting late at night one night, as you know. Uh, but of course, this tradition of sitting on and on without break through the night or through even several nights is a tradition that goes back at least to the time of Gautama Buddha himself. If you read the early suttas, it's clear that that's what he was doing uh, before his awakening, on the night or the early morning of his awakening, and after he awakened. It often refers to him sitting under such and such a tree for a week. So this is a long uh, a tradition with a long history, but it can be easily misunderstood as some kind of a tremendous willpower to break through into some kind of enlightenment. It's something much more fundamental or basic than that. It's not mere willpower. I would say you give all of yourself to the practice. That's what practice is. That's what Roatsu is. Another way to say it is for the practice to be complete. How do we do that, though? How do we actually give all to the practice? I've already gone over in some detail the practical how to's, the posture, the breath, the concentration, and so on. And if you are practicing properly, before long you see what it is for the practice itself, to find itself settled. It is settled. Before that, we're all familiar with the mind arising and thinking certain thoughts, remembering to come back to the practice, and perhaps having a dream for a little while and getting a little frustrated and trying to bring us back to the practice. Perhaps for a while sitting there in a very calm and comfortable state, dreaming away. But when we practice properly, it becomes clear soon enough. The practice finds itself settled. Another way to put it would be what must be done is all that remains. There are no other alternatives or possibilities. There is only what must be done. Have you confirmed this in your own bones, in your own practice? Where are you in your practice? Are you at the point where you feel this is what must be done? This practice is true and real. Yes, yes, I must, but I can't somehow. I can't give all of myself. 90% maybe, 97% maybe, but that all. I can try real hard, but to give all of myself, I can see that's what must be done. And I truly long to do that. But somehow I can't. Something always seems to get in the way, to hold me back. Is this your actual situation? If it is, fine. But you need to make it clear. What is it that keeps you? What is it that holds you back? What is it really? It's not the temperature. It's not your knees. It's not even your wandering mind. What is it really that holds you back? If that's not clear, is it any wonder that your practice is the way that it is? The point comes down to ourselves, me, myself. The self, aware of itself. This is what the self is, not just what it has sometimes, but when we come down to it, what this thing we call self is. I invite you to see into it clearly all the way to the bottom. Is it not already split into? What we call the self sounds like one thing, and yet it's not. When we examine it all the way to the bottom, it becomes clear. The self is already split. It's alive, and as long as it's alive, death is always right underfoot, isn't it? Can you be alive and get rid of death completely? When you're alive, you bring death into being with it. It's always there if you care to look. There is no life without death. We desire very much this year, don't we, to be healthy, good and well. But can we as human beings ever fully be free of illness? Can we enjoy sustained and perfect health? Or is the body and the mind, by its very nature, subject to illness, to aging, finally to death? This is the basis of Buddhism, as you well know. But I'm talking now about you, about me, the self, the self. It is by its very nature split. when you can really see that through, the way that practice must go opens up. Yes, we're alive, and death is right underfoot. Yes, I hope you all are enjoying fine health. But will you ever be truly free of illness? Yes, we all must have some faith. That's what we're doing here. We have faith. Do you also have some doubt? Open up to what's there. We feel connected as a self. Yes, and separate. The self, by its very nature, it is and is not itself. It is split, and there's no way this self-awareness can overcome that split, because it is that split. This is why practice must be thoroughgoing. It cannot just be sitting there dreaming. Again, I invite you to see clearly for yourself. Is this not what this thing we call the self really is? It is not one, it is split. That is its nature, if we speak of it that way. It is by nature, inevitably, it cannot help but be unstable, floundering, wavering. It cannot come fully to rest in itself or in anything else, because that very awareness is split. When you see this, the way of practice truly opens up. Who can see through it in that way? Who can see the self as split by its very nature? Tell me, who realizes that? Again, if we are practicing properly soon enough, the practice itself is settled. It finds itself settled. That very wavering mind is found to be gone. This is another way of describing genuine practice, or the practice of awakening, the practice that is awakening, inseparable from awakening. You see the importance, once it's clear that the self is split, the genuine practice of unifying, embodying, bringing all into one. And yet the split self cannot do this. Who does this? Who does this? This is why we give all of ourselves to the practice, to truly unify, embody, whether it be through the zazen itself, or through the breath itself, or through a koan, to, how to say, coalesce, fuse all into one. In the beginning, yes, this is a process, a way of using the concentration of samadhi. But the point is, when it becomes total and complete, the split itself dissolves. The split is found to be null and void from the start. Once again, you don't disappear. You don't have to. You don't become a zombie, mindless, thoughtless, emotionless. No, you don't need to. Simply to split from that split. when that split itself dissolves, the precious dignity of all is then manifest as what it is, not through the lens of the split self. It is in all of its beauty, truth, and goodness. What Buddhism describes as formless, beyond form. It cannot be grasped and turned into an object of the self. That's right. Because there is no such thing. Again, you don't need to, I realize it can sound that way, Rohatsu, sitting through the night. You don't have to destroy yourself. You don't have to destroy yourself. All you have to do is let the split, the separation, the division fall away, because it's not real. It's not real. And then you see that through the practice, the unity that you were developing in sustained samadhi, very valuable, very valuable. Without that, in a sense, we can't begin. But we don't end there. Where we end is when that unity itself, that oneness itself, dissolves. Please don't replace one set of chains with another. Don't replace one set of delusions, one set of confusions with another, even if they sound Buddhistic or Zenistic. You don't need to replace it with anything. Do you see? This does not need to be replaced. We don't need to replace what we have with anything. To truly let all be what it is. To let that split, that division from yourself, who you really are, from the other, and from the world, to let that dissolve. It cannot continue because it's not real in the first place. You must come to this on your own, in a sense. The split self can't really practice. That's why practice in the beginning is so frustrating. It's the split self trying to put, as we say, put Humpty Dumpty back together again, and it doesn't work. The split self cannot practice because it cannot bring itself together. So how do you practice? You see? You must come to that point where you can clearly see for the split self to do anything or to do nothing will be of no avail because it's still split, even if it tries to sit there and pretend it's not. It's still split. We must be humble and sincere in our practice. If we do, how to say it, the practice that seemed for the struggling split self impossible, and in a sense it is impossible, it becomes imperative. What we must do, it becomes inevitable. We can't miss it. It becomes irresistible. It draws us in. That is what the practice of awakening, genuine practice, is. It's what must be done. There is no alternative. It is irresistible. I urge you to confirm this in your own way, in your own practice. In Zen, one way to describe this is to step forward from the top of a 100-foot pole. This is found, for example, in the gateless barrier, the Mumonkan, case 46. Step, of course, first of all, climb up. You must, through practice, climb up to the very top of a 100-foot pole. And then you must leap or step forward from the top. You see, this is not easy for the split self, is it? But when we really get there, it's inevitable. It's inevitable. There's nothing else to do. In other words, to go through, yes, the practice, to know how to sit in the correct posture for your body, how to breathe properly so that the samadhi, the concentrated oneness, can be sustained, and to maintain that throughout all the activities of the day and the night. That concentration naturally becomes total. It comes to be what we are, and at one point, it disappears wonderfully. It dissolves. To step forward from the top of that 100-foot pole, to be free even from some so-called kensho or satori or awakening. Yes, if we hold on to that, well, we are replacing one set of chains with another. Before I finish and leave room for practice questions, please take a moment if you would like to stand up and stretch.
Jeff, can you say more about the split itself? What kind of split is that?
I already mentioned the fact that we are alive. We want to be alive, and yet, can we ever really be free of death? Is it actually not underfoot at every moment? We seek to do good, but do we often fail? And this is not just true of the so-called qualities of the self, but most essentially, when we sit deeply, it becomes clear that the very self that is seeking, for example, to get free of itself is already split, isn't it? Otherwise, it wouldn't be doing that. How can the self seek for itself, as Zen often makes light of, shows the preposterous, how absurd it is, the self seeking for itself. You know, from the sutras also, Rinzai mentions it several times, where he talks about Yajnadatta, this wealthy, I think he was a kind of a prince, and he was rather vain, and he thought of himself as very attractive. And he always looked at himself fondly in the mirror every morning. And one time, the cleaning woman put something over the mirror, covered the mirror, and forgot to take it away after she cleaned. So when Yajnadatta got up and went to look for his beautiful reflection in the mirror, it wasn't there. I lost my head, my face, it's gone. He looked around everywhere. He couldn't find it. He ran around, desperately seeking himself, this face, his head, searching for his head. Finally, he came back. The cleaning woman realized her mistake, removed it, and oh, it's back. Thank goodness. Well, in an interesting way, that's exactly what Zen practice is. Realizing the one who is seeking, not what is sought. Do you know what self-deception is, Jean?
Well, is it? I don't know how to define it in English. It's to deceive oneself. That is that to
You ask about how the
abuse
self,
oneself. And
yeah, how the self is split. Well, let me ask you, how do you deceive yourself? How is that even possible? Unless you're split. It's obvious. To deceive another is pretty easy, right?
yeah.
To deceive another, you can say something that's not true, and so on and so forth. But we deceive ourselves, don't we? If
Yes. Yes.
we're honest with ourselves, we see, in a sense, every day, to some extent or another, we are actually involved in a game of deceiving ourselves.
Yeah.
Pretending that we are going to live forever, pretending so on and so forth. And deep inside, we know better, and yet we deceive ourselves. How can you even ask what it is? Do you see what I mean? It's the self, what we call this self, is actually shot through from beginning to end. It's split. It's split. That's what it, the essential point. That's what it is. That's not something that some people have and some people don't. Or, that's what it is. And the fundamental mistake is seeing the self as some kind of a unity. That we, well, it's a unity, but I'm also kind of separate from it. So maybe I better get a little closer, do some practice. It's already split. It's already split.
Okay.
See it for yourself.
Yeah.
Don't trust my words. See it for yourself. And when you do,
Yeah.
who is it that can see this? Who is it that can realize it that way? Is that self split? Consider well, okay? You are the question, and in the end, you are the answer as well. But you've got to come to that in your bones. There's no other way. That's what genuine practice is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Would you like to continue, or?
No, that's all right. Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else would like to speak up from their own experience? Please feel free. Leon?
Jeff, continuing on the last question, for me the split, it's the division between my or our private experience, our private world, our interior world, private experience, and the exterior world. I clearly see myself separate, my private experience is separate most of the time from the outside experience. But when I practice for several days, or suddenly that private experience and that exterior experience is one, is the same. As I understand, there's no split when your private experience is not separate from the exterior experience. It's something like that.
Yeah, that's one way of describing it. It's interesting, huh? We all see ourselves somehow as in our body somewhere here, here, and through our senses, right? We commune or communicate with the world out there sometimes, and other times we are in our head, as we say, in our mind, in our own little private world. But as you have seen, that split itself is not absolute. It's not real. It's not real. It's always falling in on itself, isn't it? When you, as a photographer, are working something that you really are involved in, are you separate from what you're doing? No, there is no separation. And yet that awareness can always rise again to the surface. A bit of pride, perhaps, or a bit of dissatisfaction, something like that. It doesn't have to be destroyed. It's fine, but it's not real. It's not real. The thing that you are working on has a kind of reality. And you making these decisions also has a kind of reality. Yes, yes. But that's split. In a sense, that is the cause of our dis-ease. Not the conditions of the world or even the conditions of our inner world. Who makes that distinction in the first place? There's where the unsettledness, it's inevitable, right? Because you're in it, but you're outside of it. It's inevitable. So this is a very good way of making clear for yourself. Where is that? Who makes that distinction? Who makes that distinction? Thank you for your insight, Leo.
Thank you, Jeff.
Jeff, I wanted to follow up on Jean's question a little bit about self-deception, and maybe you could talk a little bit between the practice. At least for me, it seems early on, we focus on what is conscious. We have this conscious part of our self-deception that we start to see, and there's an intensity in our practice that helps us to eventually to see through that. But there's another part of consciousness, self-conscious, that's unconscious self-deception, things that we don't see. And perhaps you can talk about that in terms of, or say something about that in terms of the practice, and maybe even working with a teacher, of how that takes patience and time and how to open that up. Because I think there's a tendency to think that we've gotten through some of the things that have been difficult, and there's this whole big mass of something that's still behind us that we don't see.
Yeah, good question, David. And I trust you already see with the human self, there is no absolute, this far is conscious and then under here it's unconscious. That itself is constantly changing. What we call unconscious is sometimes becoming conscious, and it works both ways. But it's true, your basic point is a very important one, because when our patterns or our attachments or our delusions, as a very generic word, when they're conscious, when we become aware of them, we can work with them. We can work with them. But the ones that we are not conscious of, for example, they may be so automatic that we don't consciously make that judgment. It's already been made. A prejudice, for example. It's not necessarily conscious. Sometimes it is unconscious. Subconscious is a difficult term to use accurately nowadays, but at least it's not conscious. And in many ways, those non-conscious urges, whatever, these are what it really drives the self. And so it is to some extent blind as to its own roots. What is really driving it? It may try to rationalize, but often it doesn't see what is really driving it. And David, as you know, you've done these retreats. The Rohatsu is the big shebang. And the idea there is not only to open up to those conscious delusions, but in a sense, even the ones that are no longer conscious. When you sit through that long and that hard, you go past your conscious comfort zone. I see that. That's a problem. I think I can deal with that. Okay, that's a good one. I like that. But no, to go all the way through your comfort, conscious comfort zone. Again, this is not, I'm not saying you have to torture yourselves, but to sit through not just your conscious self. Yes, David, it's necessary. And that's why we have these extreme so-called practices to help us to do just that, to not get stuck in our comfort zone, because that is a delusion. The comfort zone is not really very comfortable in the end, is it? We try to make it comfortable out a little bit, but are you really comfortable in your comfort zone? How long before you start getting bored? So it's a very important topic. And in a sense, that's what a good part of the koan practice is about, where you're going through a particular koan. I mentioned the one from the Mumon Kan, but there are endless ones. But to go through that, in a way, all you're doing is bumping up against what you had not been aware of before. You know what I mean, David? That's in the beginning the struggle of the koan, because you don't know how to deal with that. You don't know what to do with it. It's not something you can put in a little box. And that's precisely the validity of koan practice. A koan doesn't allow you to play that game, to manipulate it. And you see how that naturally drives us beyond the conscious, right? The conscious self. Does that help, David? Would you like to say anything more?
Yes, that helps a lot. I guess, Jeff, what I look to, over a period of time, are the tools that are there, because I think there's so much effort that we try to put in, and we're lay practitioners, and so we don't spend these extraordinary times in monasteries. We can certainly make ourselves and give ourselves to the practices you're talking about with Rohatsu, but trying to find those other avenues within the practice, and you've, I guess, highlighted it with koan work, so that we can delve. And a lot of it's, I guess, is just patience, to have that sustained practice, and then when those opportunities are there, to give ourselves to those opportunities. But was just looking for a set of tools, because my frustration is trying to grasp something. You're trying to put effort into it, and part of the practice is realizing that effort is a dead end. And so it's the patience that goes with that, but also trying to work with a teacher or work in a situation or opportunities, whether it's going to Kyoto or doing Rohatsu somewhere else, making ourselves available. So it's that in-between time, and how I guess the practice sustains itself. And so, those of us that are not monks in a monastery, a lay practitioner, it seems like a pittance compared to the kinds of things that we hear about and that others have gone through. So it's just trying to sustain that in a way that allows those subconscious things to come out, to broaden our practice.
Yeah, David, it's very, what you say is very true. I would just urge lay people not to have this, I'm only a lay person, inferiority complex. You have what you need. And if you can just be humble as you are and sincere as you are, and continue on. Yes, we have other things to do in the world. That's right. We're not monastics, hidden away behind a wall. That's right. But what we are doing in the world is of some good, of some benefit. This is valuable. It's no less important than some kind of a great awakening. What we are doing in this world is valuable and worthwhile, and we should give ourselves to that as well. But over time, that very distinction starts to dissolve. The work on the cushion and the work out in the daily, in our daily life, career, and so on, family, that very distinction starts to dissolve in time. In time, yes, it takes time, but we have what we need. We have what we need. We are confirming that as lay people in the world, we can truly practice. Your searching question confirms that, David. I trust everyone appreciates what you have come out with. Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak up? Please feel free.
Hi, it's Marty.
Marty, yes.
Hi, how are you? Just wanted to follow up on what all the other folks are saying. I think Zen practice is a very special practice and a very deep and fundamental practice that opens up something fundamental in us, which is not the small self, which is not self. I think there are other Buddhist practices that can supplement what David is talking about. For example, a mindfulness practice. When I'm in a car in a quote unquote bad area and someone comes by of a certain look or color, and without it's all conscious. I'm there, I'm doing it, but I would say it's pre-reflective. I push the button down on my door to make sure they can't get me. And I've done that before I rationalized why I did that. And mindfulness can, if I'm aware of what I'm doing during the course of the day and life offers me these opportunities to investigate, then I can look into, see through that action. And what I attempt to do, and what I think Buddhist practice in this regard tends to do, is to bring to awareness, to embrace what it is you are, to transform it, and through that to liberate that person, situation, event. And doing so, when it's brought to reflective consciousness and to whole action, there's no need to press the button down anymore.
Yeah, I very much agree with you. Zen is a very, in some ways, it's a very elite practice. It's a very challenging and demanding practice. And there are other Buddhist practices, incredible amount of practices that can be of value and of use. Thank you for bringing up mindfulness as one of them. Yes, I very much agree. Would anyone else like to say something? Again, please feel free.
Hello. I'm John. We've spoken by email. I wanted to ask about what you said regarding you at some point realize or come to the point where it's all that you need to do. And sort of related maybe to what other people said, talking about the monastic lay difference, but I was just wondering if you could talk more about that, because it does. I mean, when I first heard that, it sort of sounds like, well, if it's the only thing you need to do, does that mean that the natural direction is, oh, you go become a monk or something, you enter a monastery, it's the only thing to do? Or is it maybe as a lay person, what does that look like?
Yeah, good question. When I say you see what must be done, what needs to be done, I don't mean become a monk, shave your head, and go into the monastery at all. That has nothing to do with it, frankly speaking. There are plenty and plenty of people who shave their heads and go into monasteries and never touch this issue. Face it, it has nothing to do with that. When I say to do what needs to be done, in other words, simply to stop escaping, to stop running from this.
Is that a internal thing then, say the way that you're reacting to things?
It
Or
would include that, yes. But in other words, to simply open up to what you have been in some way, going back to this unconscious, maybe suppressing, avoiding, denying, although you know it's there. To simply open up to what's in the depths of your own heart. I don't mean making a commitment to become a monk or reading another Zen book as a result. That's not what must be done. What must be done is to really open up to what is in the depths of your own heart. And I assure you, if you do that, it shows you the way you must go. And as a matter of fact, for some people, it may be to enter a monastery. Yes, that is a precious opportunity, but it's not necessary. And it can also be an escape. Does that help?
Yeah, I guess you're saying just to open up to what is there.
What would happen if you did that?
I mean, my instinct is to say I don't feel like I'm stopping myself from doing that. So I don't know what's in the way. Maybe, I mean, what is it that's?
Well, if there's nothing in the way, then all you need to do is to hone the practice. Do you know what I mean? To make sure that when you're sitting, you can sit in samadhi, that concentrated oneness, and just sit right through it. This, right through this. Not someone else's concern, someone else's issue, someone else's question or doubt, but what is right there for you. Do you know what I mean? Marty was talking about it in a very practical sense, being in a dangerous neighborhood and seeing how you automatically respond. But in the depths of your zazen, finally, what is there? What is there? You have all you need. Prove it, confirm it. Yes, live a wholesome life. Just because we're lay people doesn't mean, oh, well, we can do whatever we want. No, we have to live wholesome lives. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And in a sense, we have a very good opportunity to do that because we're not locked up in a monastery. We're out in the world where we can be of service to others. It can be very difficult, can it, to know what to do in certain situations, how to truly be of service. Yes, that's the marvelous, endless practice of seeing how to bring this to life in the world. Yes, yes. That's why it's important to climb up that ladder or up to the top of the pole and then to leap off. Do you want to say anything else, John?
No, thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm afraid my answer is still rather general and abstract, how to deal with it as a lay person in the world. But all I can say is whatever you are doing, family, career, if you apply yourself there in time, that separation between practice and the rest of your life naturally just starts to dissolve. When you get up from the cushion, you don't stop the practice and do something else. The sitting itself gets up. And when you return to the cushion, you don't start again. You simply continue the practice once again in the seated posture. Prove it yourself. Yeah.